Charge up your game with excitement. Highest odds on the market. Coverage of all live and pre-match events. Place your bets with solid bookmaker and win with your favorite teams. Take what's rightfully yours with GG.bet.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, to tonight's fixture between BTR and V1Z, or Very, as they may otherwise be called. I apologize for getting into this a little bit late. There was a small mishap with the IPs, but we're finally into things, and you only missed the first 5 rounds. We'll slowly go over those for yourselves, just so that we're all informed. The pistol won by BTR, starting on the CT side. They win the second round, but ever since the gun rounds have been coming out from the Very lineup, it seems like they've gotten a handle of things to start off this game. 3 rounds registered in a row, and a fast play in round number 6 over towards B. Kate can be able to get one. The secondary is there as well, but Adren King can only contribute 1 additional frag. There is a fast rotation through, and actually, Impression runs through the smoke. He's taken down an additional player in backseat. Suddenly it's Bugan in a 1 versus 2, only 20 HP in his own right. Jerome and Dreamer will double up together. They don't have a kit available. They certainly have a little bit of utility on Dreamer, but it does come down to Bugan. He's taken this angle in towards Banana. He's eliminated one of the retake positions he needed to be concerned about. Now as Dreamer gets in the bomb, Bugan he'll spray frantically, trying to track him down through the smoke, but Dreamer is still on it. Jerome deals with the threat, and the round will go in BTR's favor. Bit of a flurry of frags to start things off. Always nice to see. Some good trading over towards Banana from that CT side in particular. Kate being able to get 2 kills in that regard. And Adrian trying his best to reinforce that location, create an opportunity in which, if Kate was given enough space, could have allowed him to escape. The string of rounds has ended. We're back into an equal opportunity. 3-3, and the economy is sitting relatively similar for both teams. Bexy, the only one that's really leading in that regard. I'm hearing a lot of chatter between the two teams. It leads me to believe that there may be an issue that needs dealing with, considering the amount of players that are currently unmoving. Now, brackets control will be taken. No real contest of Banana from BTR or Very, and I'd like to think that this is a tactical or pause of some sort coming through in this round. Players are jumping around. They're not really even shooting at each other. Of course, Leng could have definitely won out this round respectively. And BTR haven't been holding their angle, so yeah, there seems like there's maybe a small technical issue to start things off. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. Otherwise, we would certainly see a knife opportunity for Tang Xiao, or Tang Xiao. But otherwise, it's a very early game for today. It is currently 5:20 AM over here in the UK. That's always fun and exciting in its own right. We'll quickly have a look at the odds as reflected over by our partners over at GG.bet. You can see just how in favor it is of BTR. And there's good reason for that. It's not as if there isn't always a good reason for the odds reflecting in such a manner, and it's typically based off of some of the reputation that some of these players have been able to garner in either previous teams or how well they've been doing as a whole now that they've kind of registered a new roster. There's names that you might remember or may have heard of if you're not too familiar with the Asian scene in particular. You've got the likes of Impression that used to play on Boots. That's a predominantly Singaporean lineup. He's Singaporean in his own right. Fets as well used to play on the likes of Epsilon. He's jumped from there, as well as Tempo Storm, a Estonian player, if I'm not mistaken. And then you've got the likes of Adren King and Kate as well, in that they've played on the likes of TOT. You've Adren King that used to play on XCN. There's been marginal successes from teams like that as well in their respective regions. Of course, XCN, predominantly Indonesian lineup, for which Adren King is Indonesian himself. That's why I think one of you had put in the chat earlier in the pregame, Poland power, let's go. Made me question myself for a whole of 15 seconds, and I remembered people can't seem to tell apart the Indonesian and Polish flags. Or at least that's what the meme would have you believe. I will head into a pause. I'll just quickly pull up the break screen just so I can have a quick look at the chat. See what's gone on. We appear to be having a ping issue for a number of players. Doesn't seem like that's still a problem. The ping seems to have stabilized on a number of, or at least everybody seems kind of hovering about the same ping, so not sure that it will be too much longer now. Yeah, it was kind of as expected. I'd heard a decent amount of chatter between the two teams, so I was fully anticipating some sort of an issue that the players were trying to address alongside the admins. They've been using the in-game scoring system and administrative tool to match medic the round, so we're back to 3-3. There's been no progress in the round. People have not bought up AKs, they've not bought up proper rifles. We'll see that same sort of economic stance coming into this round for both BTR and Very. Oh, I suppose we haven't touched very much on Very. They're a team that I think there's 3 players in particular that stood out in that they don't have too much history behind them. It all played, if I'm not mistaken, yes, so Leng CC, Maizy, and Sick that are part of the roster. All relatively fresh faces. DMM and LX of XYG. But I don't believe DMM has his name quite as it's shown on HLTV. We'll go with what's on screen just so it's easier to follow for myself and you the viewer, just so that we're not pulling different names out when the players don't have that reflected in their own right. You don't brand yourself correctly, you don't get called the right name. That is quite often how the name goes, unless you're of a very significant stature already. We'll have to see. We've dealt with the technical issues. BTR and Very equal affair so far. They'll boost early in towards the flower pot. They'll leave a lurking player over towards the B site, but Impression locks things down in middle. Very, as soon as that smoke blooms, seem to want to jump straight through it, see if they could take that fight, catch BTR off guard, but Impressions wasn't caught out. In fact, he'll get a third as he submits himself to the flames in the arches. You go on to Bexy, and he can't do anything more. Only 2 kills for Very, and what was shaping up to be a slow round before the pause and the round reset was actually a very fast one from the T side, and BTR are actually going to take the lead once more. Series of rifles dropped over, so BTR are still going to have a very strong buy coming into this one. Kate on the SG. Actually peering around the edge of the flames. They're trying to take a bit more of an aggressive face over towards Banana, and they've subjected themselves to a lot of damage as a result of that. Meanwhile, over at middle and the A site, there's been although it has been a rotation likely called, it's not one that felt overly necessary. Of course, with Kate being so low HP, if that player had gone down, then that secondary rotation would have certainly helped to alleviate some of that pressure. Depression and Jerome. Good damage over towards the arches. Find 2 kills. Very executing over towards B, and one by one they're falling. XYG is taken out. There's the bomb dropped at the disposal of the CTs, and suddenly it's just Bexy. UMP in hand, and Adrenaline King's going to make it so that he can't get any more damage done. BTR have a clean round on the CT side, and that will actually push Very into an eco situation. Still questioning who's going to replace Tai Lu as a part of their about their lineup change. I think that's a tough one. There's a lot of very good candidates. I'm not that certain as to whether they pull from one of the lineups that's relatively untested. Obviously, you've got quite a few players that have kind of made a name for themselves via the likes of Boots. You've got Vici as well that had their sort of things, but I think there's some opportunities. We could even get a more international player as well. Hope that they can either successfully transition into a team that has English as its main speaking language. Of course, you've got some players on the likes of Tai Lu that can speak both. What I assume is either Mandarin. It's either Mandarin or Cantonese. I'm originally from Hong Kong, and I still get those two confused at times, primarily because I recognize them in speech, but I do sort of forget which regions certain dialects hold. Fast play from Very in towards short, and they're gonna hear that all the way through. They've already pushed all the way through bottom B. Before Very even really recognize what's gone on, Bugan is thrust into the 1 versus 5. He gets the first, but there's far too many players approaching from behind. BTR, another successful cleanup. 4 players stay alive. They're really building this economy on that CT side. Now, I believe there's a rumor that's been spurred that a player from Tai Lu is going to be leaving. And so that is also spurred on rumors about who could potentially be filling those shoes and what player would be departing. You're hard pressed to make an argument for some of the star players that currently sit on the lineup. BTR, a lot of damage done. Adrenaline King will find 2. Here's a rotation over towards the B bomb site, and BTR seem to have the read. Lang, Eagle in hand, line up a shot on towards Kate, but the rotation, as previously stated, impressions already there, and as much as Very would have liked to have capitalized on the space that may have created, let's leave it into Bexy's hands. There's Eagle shots there. So he brings things closer and makes it so that only 2 players survive on BTR. They've had so many clean rounds in these past few that losing as many players as that isn't going to be too much of an issue. Obviously, that does weigh down on your economy moving forward if some of these rounds get closer and closer. But by and large, BTR are having a relatively easy go of things. They've gone for a few of these ambitious plays in that they may be jumping through smokes, going for sort of a burst style execute towards the A site or B respectively. But BTR don't seem on that phase. They haven't been caught out in any significant capacity to really make you think that Very are going to take the round. Gone in towards short by Jerome. There's AWP in hand. The bomb is still dropped towards T-step, so Very just taking some early control. And going to be a faster play in this round in particular. Now Bexy will go back and recover that, but Yukin gets one, or could have potentially lined up the spray transfers. That was a play that BTR were unsuspecting of. As they take that player over at that B site, suddenly Adrenking's going to be put in a terrible position. Suddenly CT is exposed and he needs to play for himself. One man on the B bomb site and the crunch is coming through, but it's only going to be a two-pronged assault. Relatively thin prongs at that, as still this lurking presence from Tan Xiaomei as well. Even deal with him. Red King is taking a very passive stance in towards that garden position, and Bexy needs to try and take these fights. He gets the first, but there's still two more players. He knows exactly where one of them is, but Dreamer, he's on the flank, and there's no way Bexy's expecting that. A ninth accrued, and Very... They would have much preferred to get that plant down. You could see the idea there from Bexy in the clutch, just trying his best to force one of these players to make a mistake, push through one of the smokes that were down, and subject themselves to very isolated duels, but just did not expect Dreamer to make that rotation from middle towards Banana. As a result, BTR have been able to accrue a decent lead. 6 rounds. Discrepancy between the two teams. Lots of damage done by the nades. These opponents are so softened up, but jumping across, Adrenking's going to be able to compensate for the fact his teammate's been taken down so quickly, and Impression's already there. Adrenking now rotating into his position. The flash is perfect, and they get both. That's 4 kills for Adrenking, and a lot of that was off the back of good utility damage, as well as that flashbang enabled by the Impression rotation. Addition of Dan King. Yeah, I could certainly see that. Or Freeman. Yeah, Freeman, Dan King, yeah, I could certainly see that. I think there's a few ways you could go with it. I mean, you've got some pretty healthy names in that regard. If you're Tai Lu, you could maybe even try and harbor new talent. Obviously, they haven't had crazy international success, so maybe that's a bit too much of a project for that to be realistic, but oh my goodness, BTR, it completely catch them off guard, and Case just run down B all the way through middle, and before they realize it, Very have hit the grave. They're setting up for a burst play in towards middle, and as he's priming the flash, he turns around and Kate greets him with a bullet to the head. That is not what you want to see if you're Very, and although this is fairly reflective of how people expect this game to go, maybe expects a bit of a better fight being put up by Very. Right now, on an individual level, it seems like BTR have that in check. They've made some very good early rotations so far in this game. Drinking round the edge of the smoke. Oh, Buchan's unsuspecting. Although he's trapped in this angle, Bexy may just be able to transfer onto a kill. Yeah. Drinking primes a smoke and mean his demise, but Impression is there again. And Impression has been so on point with how he's been moving around the map for BTR. Always in the right place to deal with at least one of the players on Very, either on A or B respectively, but this time Dreamer is going to be alone. Flash on through. He takes the first fight. He turns as the flashbang goes, and that's as easy as it gets. He took the fights. He saw that they were blind, and Very unable to accrue more than 3. They win the first gun round. They win the subsequent 2 rounds as well. But that is a very strong statement to have. 10 rounds in a row from BTR on the CT side. You could argue that it is CT-sided in some respects, especially when you have your economy rolling, and that you have all your equipment, you have all the utility you need to take deep banana control, even throw a bit of utility in towards second middle in the apartments as well, just to make things a little bit easier when a site execute does come through, or whether they attempt to take brackets control when those types of plays are employed by the T side. But should never be as one-sided as this. Bexy, 2 kills down middle. They're just taking the fights. They don't care. They don't want to give BTR any room to breathe within this round. Adren King's gonna do so much damage, able to track down a secondary kill, and Leng's been dinked up as well. 23 HP remaining, and Adren King's on for the ace. This would be surreal if this happened. No bomb on his back, so he needs to go back and recover it, and he doesn't know where Tan Xiaomei could be. Could have pushed down towards the T steps. Of course, we can see he's located over at that A side, and BTR were so caught out by the aggressive play by Very. Rankings hurt him. Oh no. Tan Xiaomei may have just given that up, and the Trent King lines up the shot. There's round number 13. It was a nice attempt from Very, going for an unorthodox setup on the CT side, taking the fight straight to their opponent, especially with them being so down. That is a risk, but it almost pulled off in a huge reward, and Adren King denies it. Doing his best to use the cover to isolate those fights, and hitting headshot after headshot as well. Not even really headshots in a row. As he was fighting one of the Very players, by happenstance able to do some additional damage, and that is likely the nail in the coffin. That would have certainly brought a sign of life towards Very CT side, but that round going askew. Yeah, this is shaping up to be BTR taking round number 14. You can imagine as well a 15th off the back of all these SMGs being saved up. It will be likely a fast play in towards A or B respectively off the back of that particular set of weapons being brought forward. If they had more rifles brought up into these rounds, you'd expect it to be more default oriented, but they can treat this fully as a bonus. They have so much of a round buffer built up that they'll be more than happy to throw 1 or 2 rounds away in search of how Very are set up, as well as trying to do some damage to that CT side. None of the CTs have head armor. This is the right play in the respect that you get some additional utility, but that makes these MAC-10s and the UMP so much more devastating. Great damage nades over towards Banana. XYG and Lang both down to 20 HP or less, and that's your brunt. That's the brunt of your B-side defense. Fortunately for them, it won't be the assault from BTR in that regard over towards that portion of the map. Meanwhile, Kate and Adren King down to 30 respectively. And overwhelmed in middle. Jerome does so much damage. That's the lacking head armor being a factor. Bugan taken down as well. And it's these 2 B-site players that have to pull things back. Only 20 HP respectively, but 1 bullet's not enough to do it. XYG survives by the skin of his teeth, and that bomb being down, that makes things so difficult to traverse. Adren King takes the risk, and BTR should set themselves up in a decent post-plant position. Very pretty far away from the site. Oh no. They'll actually double up together, and maybe a bit of information could be fed over. There'll be a lot to read into, especially given how far away they are from the bomb site, but they're just going to give away the round. BTR, up to now 15, as Viz set up for the save. I can't really argue with that line of reasoning. Of course, they're so low, and as we were mentioning earlier, the ability to reposition and take very strong post-plant positions for BTR was certainly there as a result of not kind of closing the gap in through middle and just establishing a bit more control on the A site. It'll have to be 12 in a row for Viz. And a match pause, likely called by the CT side of things, as BTR, this is shaping up to be a very one-sided affair. Another Poland star player. Listen, he's not Polish. Indonesia and Poland aren't even close. The flags do look similar. Then the Singaporean flag isn't that far off from Indonesia either. As we didn't really touch on it earlier. We looked at the betting odds previously, and they reflected pretty much the same result. Very much in favor of the team that lies ahead. What is troubling is that, of course, this is a best-of-3 series, so there's an opportunity for Very to answer back. The troubling thing is, this is Very's map pick. This is the map they're most comfortable on. And this is what BTR are doing to them. That's gotta hurt. Especially when you're the underdogs coming up against strong opposition. You'll be very confident in your own map pick. You sort of get yourself into this mentality maybe that you win Inferno, move to Mirage. Maybe it's a bit more of an even slate. Maybe even leaning towards BTR. That's fine. But that's where the late stage vetoes play into this. How you ban and what maps you ban moving into the third and decider map. Suddenly there's a bit of an awkward situation because that can sometimes be maps that teams aren't all too familiar with. But they also know that their opponents aren't that comfortable on it either. And that way it's a bit more of a chance game. How much you can read into one another and how they're likely to set up based around what is typically AWP players, whether they've, obviously if they've played the map before, whether you can identify if that setup is still going to be used against you. If you are an underdog, it's very hard as well to look at them as whether maybe playing tougher opposition and reading into how they set up on their CT side or what type of strats they employ on the T side of things, because with you being an underdog, they're not likely to give you that same level of respect. There's a lot of teams that do go by this mentality in which you have to earn that respect almost. They'll take every risk in the early stages of the game with so much confidence in their sort of strategic game plan if things go askew that they could potentially just steamroll you by being as loose and just relying on individuals and setting up very default heavy and just looking for opening picks. If that doesn't work for them, then suddenly they'll go back to a more strategic line of reasoning and start playing as if you were an opponent worth respecting. Now this man's trying to make a... He's trying to get you to part with your jersey, it seems, Truth. Well, again, I'm just going to quickly throw this over to the break screen, just so you can have something at the very least to look at. Meanwhile, I'll just get a bit of an insight as to what's going on. My Mandarin is very poor. I'm looking at the chat. It is the previous thing from XYG is in Mandarin. But I think he said it's something to do with their VoIP or the way that they're using their comms, either a team speaker, if there is a Chinese equivalent program, is having an issue. Or something to, maybe a microphone issue, something to do with not being able to call. So obviously a comms issue is as good a reason as any to pause up the game. This will actually give Very a little bit of time to think about how they want to approach this 12 round in a row streak that they're likely preparing themselves for, at least on a mental capacity. Yeah, I think there's certainly quite a few teams that you'd certainly like to see come out of the Asian qualifiers in general, not just the China closed qualifiers. Obviously, you're likely to see the star-studded teams that you expect. I would be, if there were any sort of upsets, I imagine that both analysts and casters like myself would be looking very much into them. If there's any sort of history, what kind of factors maybe it played to have gotten them into a situation where they would be gunning for that Asia's qualifier position. We've got Ratifaction in here as well. So a little unsure as to how long an issue like this may take. I open up to the floor. If you guys have any questions for myself, there is a bit of a delay between what I'm able to read and being able to respond to chat. I think there's a 60-second delay on my end as well as one on Twitch, if I'm not mistaken. So about 2 minutes, but if you have any questions for myself, whether you think I could provide any insight, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit ignorant to the Asia region. I'm predominantly UK focused. Obviously, the international circuit is a bit of a given. Yeah, you can have a quick look at the scoreboard as well for yourselves. Very, by and large, losing out in the fragging department. About what you'd expect to see. Everybody kind of hovering around 9 or more mark. Meanwhile, XYG and Tensi a little bit behind the rest of the team. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, everybody 10 frags or more for BTR. Obviously, it's going to skew that direction just based on the round lead alone for BTR. As well as given how some of these rounds went for them on that CT side, you look at how many players stayed alive consistently. You've got, on average, 3 players staying alive over all of these rounds. You've got a couple of 5s in there, some 4s and 2s as well. UK focus. Why do I do that to myself? I live in the UK, so you kind of get what you're given. You make do with what you're given, rather. But I don't know. It's a soft spot for me as well. Living here, I've attended UK LANs as well, so I'm quite familiar with the players, and I'm fans of them. One of the what would have been considered the top UK team kind of emerged from the ashes of previous lineups like Wind and Rain and some players that had really not broken into higher level Counter-Strike. You can make fun of me all you want for saying higher level Counter-Strike with regards to the UK scene, but they've been making some waves. I mean, they've been attacking teams in qualifiers. They've been doing relatively well amongst the sort of tier 2 international circuit, but they're still yet to find a decent amount of consistency. They recently got picked up by Vexed, so what I'm assuming would likely be additional funding and the sort, so interested to see how that goes. But I think there's certainly a lot of growth that the scene could use. It's weird to think that, I mean, not weird is not the right word, but it's almost amazing that the Asia or the Australian scene has kind of flourished in the way that it has, given some of the infrastructural issues they've had to face in esports as a whole. For a while before esports was really booming, and I think it's still a factor in some respects today, is that internet is not exactly the most reliable that side of the globe, given how much land there is in Australia. It can be sometimes hard if you're not located in a central location. Even then, it's, as far as I'm aware, a bit rough in spots. So the fact that they've flourished in that regard, and they've had a few teams that are really competing and getting the opportunities to compete against these top level teams. Granted, to start off, they didn't accomplish too much, but even getting to that stage meant that more eyes were on that part of the scene. You're having more tournaments organized and interested in that region, and of course, being located so close to Asia as well, you can kind of group tournaments up in that regard. So I think that probably helps. There's maybe the regional competition that kind of plays into it. The UK, we're right next to the whole of Europe, and yeah, Europeans don't mess around when it comes to first-person shooters. I think there's a lot of talent in the UK scene, but it's a mentality issue, as far as I'm aware. As with all emerging scenes, I had a small stint where I had done quite a lot of research on the Lithuanian and Baltic scene. Similar kind of stories there, where you've got some of these players that play on the likes of Imperial. They've had these moments where they've been on the big stage and they've been able to compete at the high level. They fall out of those teams, and it's just cycling players consistently until you hopefully find something that works. But unfortunately, Rome wasn't built in a day. So we've had a player drop out. Been quite a long pause already. Just been cycling through players. Just hoping that this game continues. we're at the precipice. This is almost the end of map 1. It could have been the full end of map 1, and then there wouldn't be a big gap. Because there's likely to be a break from map 1 to map 2 as well. But what I'll do is I'll likely throw it to a break unless any of you have any more questions. And I'll try and keep you as informed as I can via the chat. Yeah, I imagine the Singaporean scene is fairly insulated, however. I remember attending a... before I was engaged in Counter-Strike some 6 or 7 years ago, took part in a Dota 2 tournament in Singapore, as I used to live there. And I got absolutely destroyed because I have no idea what I'm doing. Paid attention to the pro circuit, but it wasn't enough. Got completely outdrafted, felt awful. Never been stomped so hard in my life. Obviously, MOBAs is a different beast. In that Southeast Asia region. But you do have these instances in which you're less likely to kind of intermingle between talent pools such as Indonesia, China, likes of Hong Kong. Obviously, Korea and Japan are a bit too far away to make that successful, primarily because there's even the language barrier between those regions. Europe has an easier time going about it because the secondary language of most of the European countries is English. And although Singapore, Malaysia, certain places in Indonesia have that as well, it's not quite as widespread in that same regard. Though, of course, with the emergence of the internet and being the internet, a lot of people have learned by proxy. Anyway, it does seem like we're still waiting on an additional player, so I'm going to quickly throw it over to a break. I thank you all for your patience. I saw some of the discussion that was going on here with, obviously, some of the regional talents that are coming through, paying their respects, just getting a bit of a reaction from chat. But I will try and keep you as up to date and informed as possible, and I'll see you after what hopefully will be a relatively short intermission from here on out.
Charge up your game with excitement. Highest odds on the market. Coverage of all live and pre-match events. Place your bets with Solid Bookmaker and win with your favorite teams. Take what's rightfully yours with GG.bet.
Okay, never mind. I guess we're going straight into things. As soon as I decide to play the ad, it's come right back into the game, and Very are just going to be playing out 4 versus 5. I mean, I think they'd seen just how far the odds were stacked up against them, and just how unlikely a circumstance it was going to be that they were going to be able to string 12 rounds in a row, especially off of what is a fairly scrappy buy from them would come through. So they're just going to play this one out. I think they're going to hope to resolve any technical issues moving forward in between the maps, as opposed to making us sit through intermissions. But so far, so good. We brought it to a 2-on-3 as best as they could have hoped for, trading successfully between the two teams, but it will come down to individuals to hit their shots. It will be Bexy over at the A side of things alone. Meanwhile, XYG is pushing down Banana. He's looking for some additional information, seeing if he can maybe help Bexy out a little bit, but he's going to get crunched in from both sides. He has a lot on his plate. The smoke will come through, and Bexy, can he get it done with the UMP? He'll hear the steps all the way through, but Jerome completely blindsides him on the timing. XYG cannot get it done. Jerome seals the deal. 16-3 will be the score on the first map. Inferno is taken by BTR, as it was kind of shaping up that way as we saw the end of that first half. And we will now be moving over to what I believe is Mirage as the second map. So, be interested to see how that plays out, whether we're actually able to get a 5th player in the server. I imagine if that player isn't able to rejoin, that somebody will come in and fill his shoes. But until then, we'll have to see how that all plays out, whether that's going to be a talking point whether BTR are going to be able to close out in a 2-0 manner, or whether Very are going to bring us all the way over from Mirage to train as a decider map. Don't go anywhere. Still more action to come.
Charge up your game with excitement. Highest odds on the market. Coverage of all live and pre-match events. Place your bets with Solid Bookmaker and win with your favorite teams. Take what's rightfully yours with GG.bet.